Friendships, they're so important. I mean, they're essential. He's my best friend and I love him to pieces, but he's not my only friend, and your husband shouldn't be your only friend either. But what happens when you have a guy friend or he has a girlfriend? What do you do with that? How do you navigate that? But before I get into any of that, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ayanna and this is Beyond Committed, where we talk about everything from marriage, family, faith, relationships, and everything in between, and we take them beyond. If this is your first time here, welcome and thanks so much for stopping by. And to make sure you're not a stranger, make sure you press the subscribe button below and then turn on your notifications so you don't miss a video. All right, now let's dive right in. All right, friendships. I mean, we all have them and we grow in them all through our lives. Some of us have friendships from kindergarten, high school, college, then you have those working relationships, and then you have your church, and then you have your soccer mom friends, and all these people in your life that you have different types of relationships with. And then when you get married, those people come with you, and then sometimes you get new people in there. But what happens when those new people are of the opposite sex, and how do you manage those to make sure you set the right boundaries and to make sure you're acting accordingly?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing is just having a level of self-awareness, right? You got to understand like your level of interest and or attraction to another individual. We often say stuff like, if that's not my type, this is my type, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, right, you have to be a governor, right? You could line up 10 supermodels in front of me. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be attracted to tempt them. Maybe it's only one. But I have to then monitor and manage myself accordingly to that one individual in which I'm attracted to, as an example, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, and I also think it's so important that you are aware of your strengths and weaknesses, like the different situations that you put yourself in, the way in which this other person may, pump you up or make you feel good or stroke your ego, in any situation. And that's for men and women. We all like to be, encouraged and told, we look nice or we did a good job and all of those things. And especially if that's your love language, like words of affirmation, you need to hear that. And if you're starting to notice that you're starting to hear it a little much from one person and you start to like it a little much, you have to make sure you're aware of that and act accordingly.
Yeah, and I would say even beyond, right, our own self-awareness is like listen, right? Listen to your spouse, to your husband or to your wife. Listen to your friends because ultimately, right, they're the ones that kind of give you another perspective to see things that maybe you wouldn't.
Yeah. And especially when it goes to listen to your spouse, it's also the way in which you tell your spouse that allows them to listen. So I'll give you a story. And this happened a long time ago, but it's something that I'm always mindful of now. So I keep my antennas, they always up. So he had this woman that he worked with. Totally cool. I liked her. She'd been to my house, met the kids, totally fine, no problems. And then she started going through some relationship problems of her own, and she was getting a divorce. And then I started to notice that she was leaning a little too heavily on Eric as far as, seeking advice, needing a shoulder to, to cry on and all of these things. And I'm like, okay, that's all fine and good, but those are my shoulders. So I was like, okay, I'm not feeling this, but I watched for a little while before I just was like, you need to stop talking to her because that's not going to help. And they might not listen to that because it's also how you say things that allows a person to be able to actually hear you and not just listen to what you're saying. So I was like, I just don't like, some of the things that are happening. I don't like, the way in which she's coming to you, repeatedly. And it was just like getting a little too much. I'm like, nothing has happened that I know of. And nothing that I've seen and that you've told me has occurred, but I'm not really feeling this relationship. So I told him how I felt, and then it was up to him to make the decision on how to manage that relationship.
Yeah, and I can remember this. I mean, this was a long time ago. It kind of caught me off guard out of the blue, only because this individual, not attracted to them really at all. And so there's kind of disconnect to where I'm like, well, why are you telling me this? Like, what's the point? Do you think it's a chance that remotely something could happen that somehow I would connect with her? But I think at the end of the day, when I just processed what Ayanna was telling me, and thought about the relationship, I'm kind of like, okay, what's the upside? What's the risk? What are they essential for or not? And it's like, I can still maintain a good friendship with this person, just, manage the level of communication and the depth of that relationship accordingly. And for me, I'm a very loving person. I like to support people, encourage, be there for them. It's just kind of who I am as a person. So naturally, I'm always kind of open, willing to listen, and provide any level of encouragement, especially in seasons of challenge.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to realize that you can't really just focus on whether you feel that person is attractive, because not everybody's attracted to you, and that's fine. But any right situation can be the wrong situation. So it's like there can be a perfect storm of situations. Like home life isn't going well, work life is stressing you, I'm nagging, the kids is driving you crazy, whatever the case may be. There's all these different things, and you in the right situation, the right lighting, the right number of drinks, and then you're in a wrong situation because you're like, you didn't have those filters in place before to kind of see those things. And also to be honest with yourself that sometimes you can't maintain that relationship. Like he said, with this particular person, that he was able to maintain a level of relationship. It was no longer really a friendship because they really couldn't have that type of connection anymore because I wasn't comfortable. But in not all situations, you can still maintain it. Sometimes you have to step away completely and no longer interact with that person for your own well-being, the well-being of your marriage, and also your family. It's so important that you listen. And when you do make an action, sometimes you can maintain the relationship and sometimes you can't.
Yeah, and I would even say, right, in that dynamic of just the communication within the marriage, you could even take it a step further, right, in terms of paying attention and listening to your friends. I can remember a situation, again, a number of years ago, interacting. This is like a work function, pretty, it's social, right? So I would say in this particular situation, I had a friend of mine that was outside of my, I'll call it, work environment. And within like 30 to 45 minutes of him just being there, he observed, this colleague of mine and how she interacted with me and how she watched me going from here to there. These were his words, not mine, because I'm not paying attention. But in this scenario, the download that I got from him later, he's kind of like, who is this? What is her life like? What is she doing? He's like, man, you got to be careful. And it kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, that's kind of like my homegirl. We're cool. We do blah, blah, blah. And he's like, like, you got to be careful, And so listening to his perspective, there was no way for me to explain it away, right? There wasn't a work situation or scenario that he could identify with because he was from the outside in. And so that allowed me to kind of say, hey, I got some blind spots here, right? I don't have a 360 view of everybody and everything in my life.
Yeah. And that's also something that he didn't share with me until years later. So I didn't even know that happened. I knew who this person was, but as far as from my point of view, I'd never been in those work situations. I didn't go to the work meetings or the after work functions or whatever. I was at home with the kids, which was totally fine. It wasn't like he was leaving me out on purpose or not wanting me to be involved, but he traveled a lot. So, I'm with the kids doing me, he's doing him, and it's all good. But it's funny that when he tells me later about this situation and what his friend said, and then the lady he worked with, I was like, oh, okay. And I actually felt a certain kind of way. I was like, well, why you ain't tell me at first? He was like because it wasn't no point. He was like, I handled it. And he was like, and I did tell you later, it was just trying to also not to cause drama because he travels a lot for work. And I realized that if I was always, what you doing, who you talking to, all that would drive me crazy. So I have to have a level of trust for him, but that's something that we've built over the years with him listening to me when I'm uncomfortable in the situation, and him listening to his friends that are truly his friends and love him and our marriage and support us, and having that firm foundation in God for us. Also knowing that, okay, I have to trust him, but I also have to trust God more, that God's going to cover us, keep us, and give him the insights he needs for his blind spots and for mine as well, so that we can continue to have a healthy and happy marriage.
Yeah, and I would say that's spot on, right? So we talked about the importance of being self-aware. We talked about the importance of listening to others, to your spouse and to your friends. And so, once you have all of that data or information, if you will, and you need to analyze and process that, you need to act accordingly, right? And so, what does that mean, right? So, giving your own personal assessment, you have to kind of guard your heart, your mind, and your space accordingly. There's a particular verse that I like, that I would like to share. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, it says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it," right? So at the end of the day, we still have a choice, right? God's not going to allow us to be in a scenario, situation where we actually don't have the ability to kind of get out of it or escape, right? But if we're not wise, if we're not discerning what's going on and what's happening, we could easily fall into the trap.
Yeah. And it's so important that, remember, we have choices. Every day we have a choice on what we do, what we don't do, our relationships, how we nurture them and support them and strengthen them, and how we kind of just, no, I'm good, I'm going to do me. We have choices, and it's so important that we nurture those relationships that are loving, those things that are building us. And it may not always feel good, but as God grows us and shows us and put those relationships in our lives that are nurturing and those that are beneficial for us and for others, it's so important that we are mindful of that and we make the choices to nurture those. And it's also important that we make the choice sometimes to step away from relationships, those that may not be serving us, those that may not be serving the other well, and those that may be leading us into a path in which we do not want to go. All right, that's it for today. I had fun. Did you?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and make sure you press the subscribe button below so you don't miss another video. All right, now, until we see you again.